Chuck, as I've always known him, is, I guess, going to your 4th year now at Academy of Art. Well, in their very first year of eligibility for NCAA championships, Charles and his staff led their team to both the indoor and outdoor NCAA championships, Division II Women's Championship. No small feat. 40-some-odd All-Americans between indoor and outdoor. 4 or 5 finalists in the 60-meter hurdle, finals indoors, or half the field. So it was, as well as a NCAA record holder and champion, Vashti Thomas, in the hurdle. So we said, well, Charles must be doing something right with the hurdle, so we're going to get him to share some of that information with you. So, Charles Ryan.
How's everybody doing? I appreciate everybody coming out. It's very humbling to have this many of my peers in the room and stand here and listen to me talk. I would not be on this stage, and it needs to be said, I would not be on this stage, and none of us would be as good as what we are, what we do, if it wasn't for the people that we surround ourselves with. So 2 of my former staff members are in the room today. One of them is performing her last official duty as my assistant. She will be doing demos, because I don't feel like doing them today. That is Ms. Lauren Smith and Lamont Johnson. They were integral parts of what we did last year, and without them, none of all this would be possible. And I need to give a special shout out to Ms. Serena Williams at Zurich, who helped me put this thing together, for what you guys are going to see all the visuals, because computer science is not my thing. So, jump right into it here. This is how I see the event. Okay, this is a quote from one of my colleagues who wanted to remain anonymous. Hurdling is an art, more like a dance. It is an individual expression of poise, fitness, finesse, speed, and power blended together in a particular sequence of when and how much to use of each. And I really believe that. That is how we train. It is the fundamental principle of which we go about doing all of the stuff that we put together in our program. A lot of people get caught up in the X's and O's, and all of those are very important. We'll go through some of those today, but the reason that the word individual is changed there is because the basic premise of what I want to talk about today is to know the difference between what you read in the textbook and how to get that out of each one of your athletes. Which brings us into the science and techniques and nuts and bolts. So, if you haven't read Dr. Ralph Mann's book, I highly suggest you get it. I think he is a genius, and he's doing groundbreaking work in the field of biomechanics and video analyzation for our elite hurdlers in USATF, and his stuff is absolutely phenomenal. He breaks down in his book the way the event works, and in this case, I didn't want to put the 400-meter hurdle presentation into all of that. It would have made the thing way too long, so we're just going to talk about the short ones for now, but it all applies. Gun and reaction time, acceleration, and you start, you got a 1-leg drive, a 2-leg drive, first step, second step, going into each one of your phases. Transition into the hurdle. And this right here, this basic part, your first 8 steps or your first 7 steps, depending on what kind of athlete you're working for, none of us pay enough attention to this part of the race. The start is so critical to setting yourself up in an event to move yourself down the track in the way that you need to set yourself up to be optimally in a good position. We spend a lot of time working on the start. Sprint mechanics are critical to any elite hurdler, and everything that we do in our process starts from the premise of working from blocks to 0. We're all trying to get to the finish line first, but this right here is what we spend a lot of time on, and we'll get into that in more detail soon. Hurdle clearance. Ground contact into, air time, and ground contact off. I want you to pay particular attention to the ground contact off, because that's something that I actually have a slightly different perspective on how I teach our athletes to pay attention to that. Dr. Mann and a lot of people throughout the years measure ground contact time off from the moment that your lead leg hits down in front of on the other side of the hurdle. And that's true. It's very true. It's why so many coaches teach the snap down effect, with your lead leg. But I don't see it that way. The hurdle, going into the hurdle, the foot that takes you off the ground into the hurdle is actually your trail leg. That's the last foot to leave the ground. When you come off to the front, if you put your lead leg down extremely fast, that's great, but you can't run anywhere. So you can measure that as far as air time, but I, in my brain, see air time as when your trail leg actually gets back down onto the ground, because that's the point in which you can move to the next hurdle. So when we're working with our kids and trying to teach them, how to improve from 0 to whatever level they're going to be at, we spend about 85% of our time focused on your trail leg, not necessarily your lead leg. And that, that may be a little controversial, that may be different from how a lot of people spend time working on this, but when we get Lauren up here and she's going through her stuff, I'll explain to it why I do that and how I believe it ultimately helps performance. Sprint between the barriers. And the word sprint is there on purpose. This is, don't get it confused, a full-blown sprint. I went to a clinic in California at the beginning of the fall and listened to some coaches who shall remain nameless talk about how your 3 steps should be the same, how they should be measured, and how they should be laid out and coordinated for they're all going to be the same. And we all know that that's actually not true. Each one of these steps is very, very different. They are different in length, they're different in velocity, and they all have a different purpose. And then, of course, once you clear the last barrier, it's a sprint in to the last hurdle. Now, Ms. Smith, if you would come up here for a second, please. We're going to get away that again. Step over the first one for me. No, step over first. Leg down. Okay, now what I'm talking about here is, Lauren is how tall? 5'2". Okay, one of my shorter athletes that I've ever worked with, no 3/4. Even standing here, you guys know that she can straddle the hurdle. Now the hurdle's not all the way up at her height, so can you put that one up for me?
Can you put it on the stage? No?
Sure. Well, for what I've asked her to do, it wouldn't be safe.
Oh, okay.
You sure? All right. Get on there. So even with that 33 inches and her being 5'2", this is the reason why the women's sprint hurdles in particular are a lot easier to run than the men's. She doesn't actually have to raise her hips that high at all to clear the hurdle. And no matter how fast she can snap her lead leg down, if she can actually get it down this close to the hurdle, it won't matter if you're traveling through. Because she can't run until this thing gets on the ground. So we spend a lot of time working on positioning and getting to the point where she can throw that down and get off to the next hurdle, which we'll go through in a second. But that's the basic premise. These are the numbers that we all understand in hurdling. The height of all the hurdles, the spacing, the step pattern, the length in between. The reason this is important is because everybody needs to understand that in the hurdles, everything is already dictated. It's already set up. There's not a lot of changes that you can make short of maybe going from an 8-step approach to a 7-step approach. There's no real way to cut steps out of this event. Everything is already measured. It's set up in advance. So what you have to figure out as coaches is how to get your athletes to a position where they can change something within the dynamics of them running down the track that's going to be able to get them to optimize the speed within these things here. And all of this stuff, all of these charts and available are all in Dr. Mann's book, by the way. And now this is the part to me that I found most interesting when I was going through all of this stuff. You got, first of all, this category here, you got hurdle height to leg length. These are averages. What he's done with this info is he's taken all the professional athletes that he's analyzed over the past 30 years, and put together kind of an average model to get these numbers. So obviously, me being 6'5", me being 6'2", or somebody else being 6'5", it might slightly vary, but these are averages. The actual height, so this is the hurdle height to leg length for the men's 110s. Here you got the actual height to raise, to rise, to be able to sprint, and the required height rise to sprint rise. If you notice with the men, the numbers vary so significantly between how high you have to raise your center of mass to do vertical sprinting. Anybody that was in Vince Anderson's conversation earlier, he talked a lot about the idea of continual pushing and always being up tall and running vertically. Well, when you got 42-inch hurdles in your way, there's a lot of rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall with the men. Not so much with the women. And the numbers here, if you see, this is what most people in the hurdles have to accomplish for the men, 419%, 19%, which is huge. But that's not that much higher from what they could actually get away with to clear the barriers. So what these two numbers are showing you here is that in the men's race, what the average male elite hurdler is doing over the barriers versus what he needs to do is very small. Whereas the women, they're clearing the hurdles at a significantly higher place than they actually need to run down the track more effectively. This is a lot of space here. And that's why when you see somebody doing it right, like Brianna Rollins, she's just massacring everybody in the race because she's starting to get to a point where she's wasting very little to no space in the race. She's beautiful at that. This is an issue that a lot of my hurdlers are still dealing with, and we're actively working towards right now. They're just way too high over the barriers. Most of that has to do with the way that they approach in. For instance, Mike mentioned my number one hurdler, Vashti Thomas. When I got Vashti, her PR was 13.0. This last summer, she ran 12.6. She's a horrible technician. Horrible. And it's something that we're actively working on. Her biggest problem right now is when she goes into the barrier, and I won't use you for this. When she's going into the barrier, I'm a right leg lead. I can't do it from the left. She's a left leg lead. But when she's going into the barrier, when she takes off, she brings this foot all the way up here and tucks it right underneath her butt. Well, what that is going to create is punting. And when she gets to punt, all she can do is sky up and land long. And that's something that if you've ever seen her run, she looks really fast in the first half of the race, but you maximize that over 10 hurdles, and you put her in a heat where there's girls running 12.3s and 12.4s, the gap is a lot different. So when she can be able to get to a point to correct that and go into the hurdle with a knee drive into the hurdle rather than trying to kick at it, that's going to change the whole dynamic of how she flies into the barriers. A big mistake that a lot of the women make that the men are better at is you see a lot of women, and I'm not really sure why they do it because there's really no need for them to do that. They pitch or dive at the hurdle. You guys don't have to dive. And if any of you are teaching diving, I would recommend you stop doing it because what you want to do, we all want our hurdlers to stay forward and maintain good body posture going into and coming off of the barriers. But you don't have to bend your upper body to get that to happen. Most people, we've all heard the term lead with your knee. And that's correct. But you don't bring the upper body down to your knee. You bring the knee up to your upper body. And that's a very big distinction and a cue that just by saying it wrong or just by demoing it wrong to your athletes, it'll create a lot of confusion. It's something that I came to realize I was actually pretty bad at over the last year because when I was watching the films and going through tape, I'm like, ladies, okay, there's 5 of you guys out here, 3 of you are doing the same problem. Why do you believe you need to do this? And the way that they explained it back to me, I realized that my cueing at the time was responsible for the way that they understood it. And that's something that we all got to be very, very careful with, is how you explain things because, as we all know, these young athletes, especially the kids, things can get lost in translation very, very, very quickly. This is what we're trying to accomplish here. This is the race. For the entire race, the key to performance is the creation of effective force. Highlight the word effective. Force application. The final barrier to success lies in the ability of the athlete to produce the force required to create sufficient airtime in the available ground time. If you want a scientific explanation of the short hurdles, that's it right there. Now, would I go to practice and read that to my kids? No, that's not going to mean anything to them. Okay? Our job as coaches is to take the information that we gain through knowledge and reading and talking to your peers and find a way to translate that into something that an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid can understand. And trust me, it's a lot harder than it sounds. There are no magic tricks in this race. Okay? I often get people, coaches, athletes come up to me, what are you guys doing? Give me your workouts. The workouts don't matter, guys. We're all pretty much trained in the same way. We know it's a speed event. Our kids focus a lot of time on strength, focus a lot of times on Olympic lifts. They do a lot of power work. They bound. We do starts in practice. We do pretty much the same repertoire of our own versions of these workouts. There are no magic tricks in this event. What gets caught up in my opinion, what people get lost most in is this right here. More than one way to skin a cat. Now, I've had this debate on my staff. I've had this debate with other coaches. This is true, but only in what I would describe as the abstract. We all know, the best example I can give you is, we all know if you're a sprinter, what's better, run with front side mechanics or run with back side mechanics? Front side mechanics. Now, if you want to argue that it's better to run with back side mechanics, that's cool, but science just says that you're wrong. Okay? There are a bunch of athletes out there that have run really, really fast in any kind of event, 100, 200, 400, short hurdles, whatever, and they've run extremely well. But if they fix their mechanical flaws, they're going to run faster. It's just the end of the story. You can't fight science. What our job is to do is to come up with different solutions to get them to that place. And in hurdles, how you get them there is a coaching style. So don't think big. Don't be so rigid in your thinking to think, well, this girl runs fast, and so all I got to do is make her a little bit faster, and then she's going to run faster. No, it's your job to educate yourself and find out what it is about you that you need to connect to that person to fix the nuts and bolts, to fix the mechanics, to fix the issues that they individually have. And that leads me to this. The reality is you need to focus on what is optimal. And you don't need me to stand on the stage to tell you what's optimal. There are a million different versions of videos and books and everything that have studied these things for 30, 40 years. The science doesn't change that often. What changes is everybody's process. Now you're up. You guys want to see me on stage, so let's get the other one. There are very limited drills that I do. I don't have a large repertoire of drills, and the reason for that is pretty simple. We use drills in our program for one reason, and one reason only, which is to model something that needs to happen in real life. This one we're going to do forward towards that. And I don't believe you should do any drill that isn't a part of what you want them to do when they're running down the track. Drills are cool, drills are fun, drills are good for wasting time in practice, drills are good for warming up. But if you can't connect the drill to what you want them to do down the track, then there's really no point in doing it. Anybody can stand still and do drills. The key is, can you take the drill and put motion with it and have them learn something about what they're doing down the track to model what the race should be. I use drills for this, to teach posture and body positioning. Posture and body positioning is fundamental to anybody being good at this race. There's not that, like I said, there's not that many that we do, but the ones that we start with day one when we start getting into hurdles is something that I simply just call a box. Lauren's going to demo the box. What we do is start out with your hands on the hurdles. Now, if you get good at this, which she's never been. You should be able to do it. You should be able to pull this off in the same space of your shoulders. Now that takes a lot of work. But when we first start to teach it, we let them go super wide. Because it's all going to be smaller than what they're used to anyway. So you start with the hands on the hurdles. Step back, please. Hands on the hurdles. Okay? And bring their lead leg up with the knee forward. Step over and hold the position. Hold the position. I know it's going to be sad for you for a second. Hold on. The reason you don't let them move the hands is because having their hands on the hurdles keeps the shoulders going straight. How many times have you seen hurdlers go into the hurdle like this? Or worse, like this? Keeping hands on the hurdles keeps their shoulders straight. You make them feel this position with their knee up because that's ultimately how you want them to think about bringing your knee up to your chest. The lazy ones, step back. I know you don't remember me, but I'm going to tell you to do it like me. Step through and bring your chest all the way down like you're trying to touch the hurdle with your chest. That's what she'll do, and that's wrong. That's diving. Hips are back, that's not going to work. So hips forward, big knee, make them hold that position. Step through. When they get there, the goal is to bring your knee straight up, through, and hold. No, hold. Okay, this is hard to do. Step back, go again. Notice that when she does this, step through, go straight to the trail. Stop. Notice that when she's doing this, she has to pull through this space. Step back. The goal is you want to get them to bring the trail leg right up here in this gap. As close to the armpit as possible. Armpit, breastplate, whatever works for you, whatever they most connect to. They should, if they get really good, they should feel this scraping right on through. Step through, pull it up. And hold. Now, take your hands off the hurdle. When she takes her hands off the hurdle, do it again to the side. No, that's right. You're the other way. Hold it. Take your hands off. Put your hands in the running position. When she takes her hands off, because she's all the way forward by having her hands there, her body is already set up in a sprint position. And that's what you want to teach with that. So from that, let's take all right. From that, we go into something called a hang or an explosion. Same premise, start from here. And we're going to do the one that you don't like. Good. I start this with the most difficult way possible. So you teach them box, and then you take the hands out, and I want you to get your trail leg up to the front and put that one down. Leave this one in the air. Okay, good. Do it again. Now, when you stand still. Stand up. No, it's like rest for a second. Now, when you explain that to them the first time, and you try to tell them that that's what they're going to do, they're going to look at you crazy. And be like, Coach, I can't do that. Yes, you can. Don't worry about it. You have to trick them into doing things that they don't believe that they can do. Okay? The sheer force that she has to exert in order to get her trail leg on the ground before the front one ever touches means that she's going to have to really accelerate that thing through. And she can't do it if she drops it out here. It won't happen. She'll face plant. A lot of hurdlers, something that I learned a long time ago, the analogy that I always use when we're talking about the trail leg and how to close it to the front is a clock. Stand with your feet together. Think about you're standing on a big clock. Where's 12? It's right here. 9, 3, okay? 12 is right in front. If you want to have an effective hurdler, if you want to be able to gain maximum momentum off the hurdle, the trail leg had better come all the way to the front so you can control it and put it where you want to put it. And where do you want to put it? Out here? No. Of course not. That's a break. Okay? What was Vince, earlier in Vince's presentation, he was talking about how he'll have the kids stand up and just tell them to put their foot down. Where do all of them put it? Put it out here. Where should they put it? Right underneath you. I take that a step further with hurdles. And the thing that you'll always hear me tell my athletes, whether we're at practice, whether we're at meet, we're doing pre-meet warm-ups, the idea that I want them to come to is get your trail leg up to the front and then behind you. Now, that's not physically possible, but I want them thinking that way. You can't bring the trail leg through and literally put it back on the next hurdle, but that's what they're aiming to do. And if they aim to do that, it's going to come right up underneath their hip. So when she does this, go ahead. Because there's nothing for her to land herself on until this one gets here. When they do this way, their leg's always going to be in the front. It's when you put it back in there that it starts to get messed up. Go ahead, do it again. Do it the fast one. Leave this up. Okay. Now, you're gonna have a little bit more momentum. You're not gonna see her take off because I don't want her to fall off the stage, but then when they get to the point where they can do that and they can be explosive with it, then you let them drop their lead leg like it's supposed to. It should sound like that. That's how it should land. If you do it the other way and you don't let them, if you just let them start with their lead leg first, in the front place it's gonna sound like this. That's how they do it. Because they're just worried about touching the ground. They just want to be on the ground. You got to take that away from them and make them uncomfortable. If you're doing it right, it should land just like that. I'm not going to let you fall. I'll catch you. Very good. Okay? And because she hit so well and stayed forward, you notice she didn't have any choice but to go this way. And that's what you want. You want to find a way in the dealing of your race to use all the free energy that you can have. Okay? If you hurdle right, if you take the hurdle correctly going in and accelerate your trail leg properly coming off and do something with it onto the ground, you're going to have a lot of free momentum. You don't have to work that hard going this way. You can save that for the other steps. Okay? You can save that for the end of the race. If you can optimize how you're coming in and how you're coming off, you will get to the point where, going back to the science quote from Dr. Mann, you will maximize your ground time in, cut your air time, and make your ground time off shorter. Okay, that's what you want. But how you get there is a process. So this one, I think we can do with this. Start further back. From there, once they can do that one, do something that I personally call a rhythm walk. We've all seen this done. It's just a simple step over drill. But with mine, I tell them that this box here, where the feet of the hurdles extend, this here, standing here, is a no-fly zone. I don't want you in here at all. I want them to come through, step here, and use the force of your trail leg coming down to pop yourself up into the next hurdle. Not land in here, sit back, and step through. That doesn't make any sense. We want all posture going this way. So again, she's going to step through, pop up to the next hurdle, and be forward. Back side's very good at this one. You and I can do this one. Yeah, they won't be able to see that. Let's go on the floor. On the floor. Very good. Do that one more time for me. Now again, Lauren's 5'3". Okay? When I first tried to teach her how to do this, she could not do it at all. She just wanted to step over and reach in and get close to the hurdle. It has nothing to do with her height. It has to do with the force that she's putting into the ground. It's when she lands with her trail leg, it enables her to cover that space. Go ahead. Yeah, the audience now, go ahead. Very good. And that's all we do.
How far are they apart?
All we basically do is you fold the hurdle up to the next one.
Okay.
Just real simple. You know, we start off with you got your walking drills, your walkovers, forwards, walkovers, backwards, your side skips. That has nothing to do with hurdling. That's just part of the warm-up. When we get into doing this, the box and all of that, you just keep them at that space. No, not necessarily. I start them off at 30, It depends on the individual. Right now, for instance, I have 3 freshman boys. One of them 6'2", the other 2 are 5'10" and 5'9". Okay, 5'9" hurdler. What can I tell you? Okay, the 6'2" guy is really, really flexible. So his problem is technique, not necessarily flexibility. So I try to make his situations more difficult. When he does the explosive drill, I put him all the way up to 42 because he can stand there like that. 5'9" dude can't do that anyway, so he has to be lower. But when they do the rhythms, I put the men's rhythms at 39. Sometimes I put the girls' rhythms at 36. It just depends on which person I have at practice and which one needs to work on different things. Danisha Bean has horrible hip flexibility, so I crank hers up to 36 to make her really conscious of pulling that one all the way up and off. And the only other drill that I do, and I don't do it all the time, again, it's an individual thing. I don't even know if Lauren's ever done this one. No, you actually didn't need to. You done this one? No. Okay, so this is something I call an escape. Yeah, and this one I do minimally put it at 33 because that's kind of how to get a better feel for it. So you take the lead leg, put the heel of the lead leg against the hurdle, not just against it. You trail leg up, put your foot on either side. You're good. Heels on the back of the hurdle, toes on the front. Now, just her standing there is very difficult to do, so I'm going to help. This is a position that I would love to see everybody in when they leave the hurdle and they're trying to exit. And what this drill is for is you get them stable, they have to tighten their core, tighten their glute, and the exercise is to pick this one up and finish the movement, because so many of them want to put it down at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. No, you got to pick it up, pull it to 12, and get off the hurdle. So, get off. And that's the movement. Okay? So, Vashti does a lot of that. Julian used to have to do a lot of that. And I use that one for the hurdlers that grew up being taught to have their trail leg wide and flat. And you just do this. Okay? If you ever watch Vashti race, her biggest problem is she does this. It's atrocious. I'm not even sure how she's able to do that. But her trail leg 2 years ago starts here and couldn't go and just goes straight to the ground. Last year, it starts here, not nearly as high, but it starts here, and then she can pull it all the way to the front and then put it down. Now, she's extremely strong to be able to do that, but it's how she starts it off that's killing her race. And I said killing her race, but she ran 12.6. Well, yeah, but if she wants to go medal, she wants to run 12.2. Okay? So she has to correct that. And there's something that I preach when I talk to high school kids, when I talk to high school coaches, do not ever let them do anything that is outside of what you want them to do in a race. If they can't 3-step, then jam the hurdles in and get to a point where they can 3-step. Okay? That's what we do. That's what everybody should be doing. It doesn't make any sense to let them 5-step in practice and then go to the race and expect that they're going to 3-step because they got adrenaline or something like that. That's not going to happen. Even with my kids, even with Vashti, she can run 12.6. If she starts training in the fall, when we get back on hurdles, she starts them out at a minimal space. I put them close enough that she can run the rhythm that I want her to be able to run in the race down at the end of the season. For her, last year, it was 0.98 seconds. When we started off at a reduced space, I think it was 2 steps, and when she got to the point where she could run 8 hurdles, in 0.98 seconds consistently, well, then it's time to move them out. I don't even tell them when they move them out. I just move them. They don't notice, I don't care. They just move them out. And we got to the point where by the end of the season, she could run them at normal spacing in the same rhythm. But that's a process. You can't just expect them to go. The funniest thing is when you have somebody new on your team and you go to the very first meeting, they're like, Coach, I've never seen the hurdles at normal space. They look so far. I'm like, look, do what we did in practice. If you run it like you run it in practice, then you're going to run fast. If you step out there and start trying to overstride and cover space in between doing it that way, you're going to get killed. And every now and then somebody does that. And for the most part, they go out there and they remember what they've been working on consistently for all that time. So set it up in practice the way you want it set up in the races. This event is a sprint. It's nothing else. And for the record, the 400 hurdles is a sprint. Nothing else. Okay? If you attack the race from that mentality, you have a lot more success. Okay? It is a sprint with things in your way. You can't change it. Okay? The biggest problem is people try to act like hurdles is somehow some kind of ulterior event. It's not a distance race, but it's not really a sprint. Yes, it is. And if you go back to that something that was in the chart with Dr. Mann, this right here. This is the average percentage of a hurdler stride length in their race versus how they would run normally with no barriers in their way. What do you notice here? The women are damn near exactly the same as if they were running 100 meters, 93%. The men can't do that. Why? The hurdles are too high. There's too much rise and fall. So by the time it takes for them to do that, they really have to cut their steps. Who's the best in the world at cutting their steps? Aries Merritt. That's why he's world record holder. He's not the best technician. He's the greatest in between. And he's mastered that, and that's why he can run what he wants. But in the long hurdles, notice it's more than. You have to find a way to actively get your 400 hurdlers to learn how not to overstride, but to extend their normal stride length in that race and run comfortably doing that. That's something you have to actively work on. And it's difficult. It's very difficult to do. But if they run around the 400 with the same stride rate that they would just run normally, the steps are going to end up being inconsistent, and it's going to get to a point where they're just going to end up tucking out. You've got to fix that. You've got to work on them elongating their stride and having really good front side mechanics to get longer than what they're normally doing. Okay, start mechanics, steps, and fads. I have fads in there because over the last couple of years we've all seen hurdlers, and especially the male elites, doing this new 7-step phenomenon. It does work. It's fantastic. It's beautiful if done right. It's the ugliest shit in the world if it's done wrong. For a man or a woman, and women can do this, to run seven steps from blocks to the first hurdle, it requires an enormous amount of strength and an enormous amount of power mechanics down the track. You have to hit that perfectly to get something out of it. Doesn't matter if they can do it. Look, coach, I made 7. Who cares? You're breaking and jumping into the hurdle. It doesn't make any sense. Okay? You have to be able to understand the difference in what you're looking at. Use the video. If you have a male or a female hurdler that can benefit from doing that, I say go for it. Don't be scared of it. I've experimented with it myself. And Mike talked about the last year's Indoor Nationals. This is a coaching error that I copped to at the time. I'm copped to now in front of all my colleagues. I wasn't worried about Vashti losing the 60-meter hurdles indoors. Wasn't concerned with it, didn't pay it no attention. I'm like, we're going to win that race. So in the fall, we're going to work on you learning how to push. And the best way for me to get her to challenge how she learned how to push was to take away how she was comfortable. So 2 years ago, I started implementing her working on a 7-step. Last year, I let her do it in races more often. She ran 8.1 with a 7-step. I'm like, good. We're going to keep working on that. I always intended on putting her back to 8 for outdoor season. I just never imagined she could screw it up. We go to nationals. She had a late reaction to the gun. She panicked. She stuck her foot out, and she got blasted to #1 and spent the whole 5-hurdle race catching up and running people down. She lost. She lost to a phenomenal hurdler named Dana Williams from Johnson C. Smith, who was a phenomenal athlete who I underestimated. If I would have just gave her back her original start, the situation would have been different. But it was my arrogance, my explanation of a greater purpose that just deterred me, and I cost that girl the title. We went to outdoors. First race, she's still working on the 7. I literally, Lauren was standing right there. She's working on the 7, getting ready for a race. I'm like, Ty, come here. She's like, what? I was like, put it back to 8. I said, what do you mean? Let's do it. Let's put it back to 8. She had forgotten how to push wrong, because when she came out of her normal stride, she would do this. She had figured out how to push in a straight line. We've been working on it for so long that she just started beautifully, and she opened up her season with a 12.9. She smacked number 9, almost fell on her face, and still ran 12.9. Her PR was 13.0. And from that moment on, she understood what the longer purpose was. But that was a mistake that I made. So when you're going through these processes, you know, don't get caught up in the new hot thing. Work on what's optimal. Stick to the basics. Keep it simple. Start mechanics, like I said, the way you set up the first hurdle is invaluable. The steps. If you don't work on the shuffle, you should, but you have to keep in mind that you work on the shuffle in the example of it still a sprint. They can't shuffle and lose the idea that they have to sprint. That's a big issue. Okay? That's all about that, how you come off the hurdle. It's still a sprint, it's just slightly varied. There's all kind of little things you can do. You know, step up. You can do the stair step up thing. You know, boom, boom, tap, 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 tap. Oh, you go to it there. Okay. She falls backwards, it ain't on me. I recommend you do this on the ground. Okay. That's just something that gets their body thinking, moving steps faster. The other thing I do is you take the lane lines and how fast they can get 10 steps from one lane line to another. When you're working on any kind of hurdle, 5 steps, 3 steps, whatever, I spend a lot of time with the hurdles in the middle of the lane. So the lane line cuts the hurdle in half. If you ever watch Lolo, Queen, Brianna, what they've all figured out, I don't know if you guys can see this piece of the stage here, but the lanes are 4 to 8 inches, right? You should be able to run the race in a 22-inch lane. That's how much space you should not waste. So we spend a lot of time in practice telling the kids, stay on your side, stay where you belong. If your lead leg is in the middle of the hurdle, well then your trail leg's out here. And you're probably gonna get yourself hit, you're probably gonna get yourself in trouble, okay? So stay in your lane, stay in your box, cut the hurdle in half, you hurdle here. This part, that's not for you. You make yourself small and powerful and stay in your area. That takes, you'd be surprised at how much time that'll cut out of your race if you're running in that precise of a straight line instead of weaving all over the lane. She's a weaver. Okay? And I believe when I see it. And the reason that a lot of people waste space coming off the hurdle is inversely connected to what they're doing or not doing with their trail leg. Again, if I come over the hurdle and I put it here, if my ground force is here, where am I going to go? I'm going to go that way. And I'm going to spend time straightening myself out. I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to land this way. Okay? But if it's all the way to the front and it's here, straight down the track. Saves a lot of time. Now, all of that said, all of that talked about, that's the science. That has little to do with what we should all be in this room trying to figure out. What really makes somebody an effective coach in whatever event is their ability to do that. Science is only useful if it makes the coach a better artist. Remember that. Remember that, write it down, put it on your mirror, do whatever it is you need to do. But if you don't understand that, you're never going to be an effective teacher of whatever thing you read in a book. It doesn't matter. You can give the kids the book. They can read just like you can. You have to find a way to connect that and teach it. Coaching is more than coming to practice with a stopwatch and handing people workouts. I don't even give my kids workouts. They have no idea what's going on in practice when they show up. Because if I tell them in advance, some people ain't going to show up that day. Okay? I don't do that. I don't have any particular workout that I care about so much that it must be done that day. I don't do that. I do this by feel. I do it by touch. I go to practice, tell them to warm up, ask them how they're feeling today individually. Okay, you guys look pretty bad in warm-ups today. You, and you, we're working on this today. You, and you, we're working on this today. I have a plan for the week that I know what I want to get accomplished. And if one person needs to do it on Monday versus one person needing to do it on Tuesday, so what? Change it up. Have flexibility. You guys know, if you watch your athletes the way you should, you know when they're ready to go out there and do some flying 30s. Or you know when they're ready to go out there and do some power starts. You know what's happening. Some days you may have this plan laid out and you're like, yes, I can't wait to get to the track to do this, and they're warming up and like, man, this is going to be a terrible day. Change it up. Who cares? Switch it around. Be creative. You have to find a way, because if you don't, you're just gonna waste that day of practice. Or more importantly, if you let your ego and your plan be the be-all, end-all, you're gonna get somebody hurt. And trust me, I'd much rather tell Vashti, you know what? You look crazy today. Go do some strides in the grass and stretch and do some core work. We'll come back tomorrow. Then get that girl hurt. Now she's out for 2 months. Difference in the season. Okay? So protect your athletes. Understand that you need to find a way to teach them what they want to know, but always remembering that it is a process. This is what we work on all day, every day when doing hurdles. This is a rhythm event. Short hurdles, long hurdles, it is a rhythm event. If anybody asks me, break it down, just give me the bare minimum, that's it. Rhythm. That is what we train for. That's all we train for. Like I said, if I want a girl to run 13 flat in hurdles, I better be able to get her to produce that in practice. The rhythm of it. Doesn't matter if she can do the whole 100 meters. Her body has to know the rhythm. If you want your 400-meter hurdler to come through the first 200 in 28 seconds, you damn sure better get them to do it in practice. Don't just send them to the track and say, hey, this is what we're doing today. That doesn't work. They have to train for the rhythm. And you have to find creative ways to get that rhythm out of them. Okay? What is rhythm? It's a regular, repeated pattern of sound or movements. And that's Webster. Okay? If Webster knows this, we should all know this. Sound. Sound is important. You ever been at practice and you're not really looking at that particular rep, but you heard it and you know it's right or you know it's wrong? Make them aware of how it sounds. If you got a group of hurdlers, don't line them up and make them race. They don't get nothing out of that. Make 4 of them stand there and watch the other one. Have them close their eyes. Have them understand what it sounds like. The visual is great. Visual is awesome. But if I put a video up right now of a kid playing drums and ask you to tell me what song they're playing, you ain't gonna know. They have to hear it. Sound is very, very, very crucial to what you're doing in this event. So use that. Understand it. Make them responsible for being another eye and another set of ears at practice. We use that all the time. Rhythm and sound is very, very important. One of the greatest things Vince Anderson ever taught me was that right there. Competence is much more valuable than confidence. Understand what that means. If they know what they're doing and why they're doing it, you're going to get better results. Who cares if they feel great about their race or if they don't going in? That don't mean anything. Confidence will betray you when you need it most. I've seen it. Hell, I've done it to people. I'm in the warm-up. I've changed. I'm like, you know what? Todd, go jump over. Just go bound over some hurdles real quick and freak that girl out. Do it all the time. Do it all the time. You've seen people that drill master. I'm like, yeah, just that drill that you saw her do, just go do that real quick. Show them that you can do it better. Confidence don't mean anything. Competence. Know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And make sure that they understand that. It will save so much time. And I've said everything I've said to say this. This is your job. Train the athlete, not the event. Okay? If you want to be good at anything, 100 meters, 200 meters, 400 meter hurdles, whatever it is, you train the athlete. Like Mike said, we put 4 girls in the finals of the indoor NCAA championships last year. And we would have put 5 in the hurdles of the outdoor championships, but my number 2 girl broke her ankle in the middle of the race last year in the semifinals. Our team at ArtU last season, our worst girl, our heptathlete, ran 13.5. Our best girl ran 12.70 during the NCAA season. That's 5 different sets of problems. Okay? If you think that I said, okay, ladies, this is how hurdles are ran, and all you need to learn this, and let's go do it, you're wrong. You're dead wrong. Cookie cutter doesn't work. It doesn't work. All it's going to do, if you take all your athletes and put them in the exact same system, the exact same program, the exact same strength training, you got 10 of them, 2 or 3 are going to get really good. 2 or 3 are going to be exactly what they were when you got them, and the rest of them you're going to break. Okay? You have to individualize what you're doing. You have to find a way. Lauren's problems as a hurdler don't have nothing to do with Brianna's problems as a hurdler. And so what I would do, because we all know we're limited on time and we could be at the track, I group them up by problems. Not by speed, not by who has a better PR, by problems. Donisha and Vashti they have a terrible issue with flipping their trail leg. So they practice together, so I can work on that specific skill a lot more than Juju and Bree, who didn't need that. They needed something else. You ever notice that if you give an instruction to one person within the earshot of the next person, they all of a sudden start to try to do what you were talking to them about? Nothing to do with each other. I have to separate them all the time in practice. I'm like, come here. You're going to have this conversation. You're going to do this. What are you telling her? Don't worry about it. That's her issue. And you got to watch how you message, because that does matter. Train the athlete, not the event, which will ultimately make you a better teacher, a better developer. I honestly see every athlete as a canvas. And no, that's not just because I work at an art school. That's something I was saying to my high school athletes in Knoxville, Tennessee. They're the canvas. I'm the artist. And it's my job to use creativity and have the will to individualize their process. If you don't do that, if you don't take the time, if you don't care enough to individualize the process for your athletes, you really don't have no business working with them. You don't. It's your job to maximize the talents and ability of every kid that you have the ability to work with. Not just the fast ones, not just the easy ones. Okay? It's real easy to have a superstar and just maintain them and let them go get you some rings. You have to show improvement. You have to be able to get whatever gifts they have in there. It's your job to pull them out. And like I said, the process that you go by doing that will be very different for each person. That's something, we're talking about influences. Something transitioned into my personal influences. I've been very fortunate enough to grow up in this sport around some extraordinary people, extraordinary coaches. I know that I've had a better upbringing in this sport than most people, and I'm thankful for that. But it's not my job to just take my experiences. Well, this is what I used to do when I was running and just give it to my kids. No. I have to stand on the shoulders of giants and evolve. Do something else. Come up with something, come up with my system, my plan. But these are my influences. When I was at UCLA, John Smith was my coach. You don't know John? Google him. Okay? When I was at South Carolina, one of our 2013 Hall of Fame inductees, Curtis Fry, was my coach. You don't need to Google him, come to the presentation tonight. All right? Vince Anderson. When I graduated from South Carolina, I moved to Knoxville, Tennessee to train with Vince Anderson for the 2004 Olympic trials. And I ruptured my hamstring. It wasn't his fault, it was mine. I wasn't taking care of my body. But I learned so much from that man in that short time span, it'll make your head spin. Okay? But it's not just these coaches and these mentors and my colleagues that I learned from. My number one teaching tool has been my kids, my athletes. If you don't learn something from the people that you work with, you're not paying attention. These kids will humble you. They will make you change your perspective. They will force you to get uncomfortable and think outside the box. And if you don't challenge yourself that way, then you're not going to be worth your salt as a coach. Now, this presentation is about hurdlers, so these are, my more prominent hurdlers. Jacqueline Coward, who just graduated from Central Florida, who was trained under Carol Smith in college. She was my high school athlete. That's what she did in high school as a junior, because I left for the college ranks right before her senior year. When she was done with her junior season, all those marks right there were top 10 all time for the history of high school track and field. That girl's a monster. I didn't do that to her. All I did was put her in the right position and get her to think about herself a little bit differently. I taught her very specific tools, but she had those gifts. I didn't make those gifts. Got 5 minutes? Good. Actually, that's perfect. Almost done. Antoinette Cobb. A lot of you probably don't know Antoinette Cobb's story, but when I first got hired at Louisiana Tech, this girl's PR was 1440, and she had just been out of school for a whole year. She had been diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer at 20 years old. My boss, Sean Jackson, was like, hey man, this is your number one hurdler. And he told me the story. I was like, dude, what am I supposed to do with her? She might die at practice. Like, I don't even, seriously, like that was my fear. I thought she was gonna lose it at practice one day. Fourth day of practice, she comes up to me, she pulls me to the side, and I know I was not treating her like everybody else. I was, gloves off. She pulled me to the side and she was like, "Coach, I came back to do this for a reason. You can't treat me like I'm sick." I said, "Okay, you got it." 3 years later, 1303. She didn't do that. That girl taught me about will and determination. And that is the hardest working kid that I've ever worked with. I may never get a kid that deep ever again. She's amazing. And then of course, Vashti Thomas, who is easily the most gifted athlete I've ever had the privilege to work with. She's a beast. She can do anything. Her sprint times aren't out there, but she runs 22.7 and 200. I mean, she's amazing. I learned so much from all of these people, and so much, from my colleagues, and my support group, and all of that and all those other people. But through the process of the people that you get to meet in this sport, and the journey that all of us go on as coaches, it's infectious. And that's what happened with this team. That's the reason we were able to do all the things we were able to do last year, is because the group and the culture that came together for a purpose meant something bigger than just how fast they were going to run as individuals. And you guys guided that. The culture that you set up in your training means a lot. The funny thing about that shuttle hurdle national record is, number one, I tied the record set by one of my mentors, Vince Anderson, who's at Texas A&M. The second oddest thing about that is Vashti was on that record team at Texas A&M. And the third oddest thing is they did it 10 years to the day that myself, under the direction of Coach Fry, set the men's NCAA record at Penn Relay. Very strange year, 2013. But if you remember anything else that I said up here today, this is what I believe. This is how I coach. This is why I do what I do. Live every day in a constant state of evolution. If you don't understand that, if you're not willing to evolve, your kids won't evolve either. If there's any questions, I think I got like 2 minutes.
You mentioned that the hurdling event is a sprint. The skill of a sprint is the actual sprint. How much time do you devote to the actual skill of hurdling in terms of drilling and training? Yeah.
I mean, first of all, we start with the skill of sprinting. You can't teach kids how to sprint, they're never going to be able to how to hurdle. But we do technical work in the beginning of any practice that we have with hurdle. So if it's a hurdle day, we spend about 20 to 30 minutes working on the skills. But like I said, I don't have a lot of drills because all those drills are motionless. They got to take that and get in it. So we don't spend that much time with it. They got to learn it at full speed. Yes?
Do you do the same drills for men?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So same race times, 42-minute hurdles? For the men, you want to put the hurdles as high as they can handle stepping over.
Like I said, she's 5'2" and she can straddle the hurdle. I'm 6'2", I can straddle the 42-inch hurdle, but I got long legs. My 5'9" hurdler, he can't straddle the hurdle, so there's no way that he can do that. So you just put it at a height, and that's basically how I test it. Is how high they can straddle it, and whatever height that is, that's how I set it up. My time is up. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Charles. We're going to end the back.